at the Sea of Galilee. Peter's Simon house. Top view. Peter Simon's house, close by the synagogue. Inside the church where Jesus fed the 5,000, not included the women and the children.
Danny didn't tell us anything about it? Yeah, well, I always blame it on the guy. You know, we're at the bottom of the. Your rooms are not good. The bed is not good. The bus is not good. The guide was not good.
Nothing is good.
We always get it. We are the only ones who get the ramp.
And everything is excellent.
That's good.
Excellent, yeah.
Pretty good.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'm happy.
That was a nice meal.
We'll try and keep you happy at the rest of the trip. Tomorrow, I'm already warning you, because it's the only place we have to stop. Food is not bad, but it's going to be a madhouse. So as we're in the Judean desert at Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, this is where we'll have lunch. The food is good, but it's nothing like this way. We said only with two groups, it'd probably be like 20 bucks, but it's either that or go and get dead fish out of the Dead Sea. That's our only option.
So you got fishing rods.
Yeah, fishing rods.
Pack a lunch.
These are special fishing rods for dead fish in the Dead Sea.
Then we pass to McDonald's then.
Yeah, by the way, there used to be a McDonald's at Masada, but they closed down. So,
Part of business.
by the way, the McDonald's here tastes differently because the hamburgers are circumcised before they serve. The Jewish hamburgers. By the way, seriously speaking, McDonald's, it's a local guy called Fridan who bought the franchise, paid a lot of money, and wherever the McDonald's joint is, like in Tiberias, most of them practicing Jews. You'll have no non-kosher McDonald's, which means you go to the McDonald's there, the bun is the same, the meat is the same, though it comes from a kosher slaughterhouse and it's kosher beef, but you won't be able to get cheeseburgers because you can't mix dairy and meat. You won't be able to get milkshakes. But there are other places where the community is not practicing, where you can get milkshakes and such. And the local owner of the franchise tried to change the image because people say it's unhealthy, don't take your kid. And they changed the oil to canola oil. They use a locally grown beef, doesn't mix it with any animal fat. And recently there was a survey on television because we have a lot of fancy hamburger places, a lot of fancy names. Turns out that McDonald's is the healthiest and best quality that you can get in Israel. psychistries, no womanphilias that are not native to this country. Oleanders, yes, this pink flower over there. This one over here, this is oleander. It's native. It usually grows in areas where there are a lot of water there, by the way. Extremely poisonous. You touch it with your hand and then you put it in your mouth. It's poisonous. If you use dried oil from an oleander to barbecue, your meat is poisonous. And recently somebody published, you can find it on Google, how to with all the poisonous plants you have in your backyard if you want to get rid of your spouse without leaving it. You use oleander and make tea out of it, and little by little your spouse will wither.
Disappear.
The autopsy shows heart failure, blood problems. So, you want the website? Okay, seriously speaking, we're on the Sea of Galilee is just like half a mile away from us. Picture maybe a few palm trees, 7 springs of fresh water. This place is called Kappa, which is the Arab pronunciation of Hepta Pegon. Look at the sign over there about it. It says Church of the Hepta Pegon. Hepta Pegon means the 7 springs. When those 5,000 men, those who followed, we said about 20,000 men, women, children, slaves, whatever, finished listening to the Sermon on the Mount, they came down here to quench their thirst. So this is when they realized this. I'm reading from Matthew chapter 14 and starting with verse 13. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from their towns. When Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd and had compassion on them. He healed the sick. Yet the evening approached. The disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to their villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go anywhere. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, beside women and children, as you all remember. What you don't remember, then in Matthew, there's another account. There's one chapter 15, starting with verse 29. Reading this. Now you remember what happens later. They collect 12 baskets, representing the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. Now comes the other description. And this is from Matthew chapter 15, and I'm reading from verse 29. Jesus slept there and went along the Sea of Galilee. Then he went up to a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet. And he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, and the crippled made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way." His disciples answered, "Where could we get enough bread in this remote place to feed the crowd?" "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. 7, they replied. Remember at the first reading we had 5 loaves. Here we have 7 loaves, they replied, and a few small fish. There we had 2 fish. Here we have a few small fish. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then he took 7 loaves and the fish, and when he had given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and they in turn gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. Afterwards, the disciples picked up 7 baskets of broken pieces. We had 12 baskets, now we have 7 baskets of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was 4,000, beside women and children. After Jesus had sent the crowds away, he got into the boat and went to the vicinity of Magadan. Now, Magadan is believed to be somewhere on the western side. If it says he traveled in a boat to Magadan, it means that he was feeding the 5,000 on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. 5,000 were fed here. Most of them, if not all of them, were Jewish. The other side is the land of the Gadareans, where the pagans lived. These were pagans that he was feeding. And who are the 7? Why 7? Nope. You go back to Deuteronomy 7. When Moses was given the orders in the desert to uproot the Canaanites. There were 11 Canaanite groups of people living here. 7 of whom Moses was ordered and later Joshua to destroy and drive out of this country. I'm reading to you from Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 1. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess it, drives before you many nations, Hittites, Gerasites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivitites, and Jebusites. Jebusites are the one who David conquered in Jerusalem. We'll see when we get to Jerusalem. 7 nations, larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you, and you have defeated them, then you might destroy them. Now Jesus is bringing a message of love, not only to the Jewish people. He's also bringing a message of love to the pagans on the other side, who are the descendants of those 7 nations that Moses and later Joshua were ordered to destroy. And he's calling both Jew and Gentiles back to this message of love. These are the 7 nations on the other side, 12 children of Israel.
Do you think he fed one side and then went over and fed the other side?
No, there were
this
some-
side was 12 and that side was 7.
Yeah.
Signify that.
And that side, he fed 4,000 and he said 5,000. There were some scholars at first who said that it was actually one feeding, but it was described twice in different ways. I doubt if Matthew has 2 records where he talks about deliberately, specifically 4,000 on the other side, 5,000 over here for sure, and otherwise they'd have either 7 baskets of both feedings or 12 baskets of both feedings. There's definitely a message here that this message was a message of love for the Jewish people. The message there was a message of love for those people who were originally rejected by the Almighty. Now Jesus is calling them back as a message of love. That's the difference between the 2 feelings. The first churches that were built here were built in the 4th and 5th century. There was a big destruction of churches throughout this country when the Persians, it was a constant battle between the Roman Christian Empire known as Byzantium and the Persian Empire. The fact that they fought one another for so long weakened them, and this enabled the Muslims in the 7th century to just walk through this area all the way to Europe. They reached all the way to Austria, they went all the way down to Persia, to Iran, because both these empires were so weak after fighting one another that the Muslims had no problem of conquering them. In 613, as part of the battle between Persia, Iran of today, and Byzantium, which was the eastern part of the Roman Empire, the Persian forces swept through this country and destroyed all the churches. 650. This was when these churches were destroyed. Then they were rebuilt again several times, and the church you see here was built in the early 80s and was built over what they found the old mosaic floor of the 6th and 7th century church. So when you enter the church, I'm not supposed to guide inside. When you enter the church, you'll see a beautiful mosaic floor. 2/3 of it is reconstructed. 1/3 of it is the original mosaic floor from the Byzantine period. And the way you can tell the difference, because when they reconstructed it to look like exactly the old one. If you look at the stone, when the stone is not shiny and dull, that's reconstructed. If you look at the mosaic floor and you see they're shiny, they are the original Byzantine church that was here. On the right-hand side of the altar, you'll have themes of mainly birds that grow along the Nile, and you'll see a pole with Roman letters. This is a nilograph. I'm sure you heard about the nilograph, the festivities of the Nile when they would open the dam. Now, why do you have a scene from the Egyptian Nile over here in a synagogue in the church in the Holy Land? By the way, in Jewish synagogues, you also have these Egyptian themes on the mosaic floors of synagogue. Most of the artisans and artists who were laying these mosaic floors came from Alexandria, Egypt. And you could, if you wanted a special design on your church and synagogue, you had to pay extra. If you use the motifs that they had, they said, you know what, if you let us put in Egyptian motifs, we know how to do it, you'll get it for half price. We have a lot of Egyptian influence in churches and synagogues from the Byzantine period and the Holy Land. On the altar itself, you see a rock. This is the rock where the disciples placed the basket with the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, and you will see in the mosaic a basket with the loaves of bread and 2 fish on both sides. This part of the mosaic is of the original Byzantine church. Go in, take pictures of the men, remember to take off your hats, and as we enter the courtyard, I'll walk with you into the courtyard. front, you will see 7 bronze statues of fish that represent the turned by a mule or donkey. Turn around and the wooden poles come this way, wooden pole this way. Farmers would do the olives because the olive oil is in the seed, and you know an olive seed is very hard, so you need a heavy stone to crush it. And then the crushed olives and seeds are placed in a round basket that is made out of palm leaves. You fill it in, you place it in the stone. The stone over here would have 2 wooden logs anchored in these slits, a bridge above, a screw press, and you had the metal poles. You put the baskets over here, and you'd squeeze the basket, and you'd get oil and water. And this would go out through, probably through here. Here you had a container. Olive oil would float, skim up the olive oil, get rid of the water. And the water has a lot of acid. Wherever you pour this water, nothing will grow. So there were certain areas where you were supposed to pour the water that was left when you were pressing the oil. And remember, in biblical times, both in New Testament times, at the time of Jesus, going back to the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, olive oil was one of the main exports from the Holy Land to its neighbors. That's going on.
For those of you that don't, it's a running water, it's spring water. My God. Clear water. Clear spring water. My God.
我在摄像呢。哦，这就是巴尼亚斯，水好清凉。
Pachi, ang aking asawa ay doon enjoy sa aming bakasyon. My God, it's a very nice place.
Walk carefully, don't fall. And this is the cave that we talked about. That's the cave. It's the foot, it's part of Mount Hermon. Yeah, that's the foot of Mount. We're not the foot. It goes all the way up Mount Hermon. Yes.
Are you familiar with the play Julius Caesar?
Yeah. Nabatean princes from Petra. They got married and they lived in southern Judea, an area known as Idumea. Only time in history where a Jewish king forced, this is a Hasmonean, we call Maccabees or Hasmonean, forced anybody who wouldn't convert to Judaism to have to leave the country. And his parents decided, for their own reasons, to convert. Herod himself was born in a place called Marissa, south of Jerusalem, educated in Ashkelon, and therefore he was a Jewish king, but his parents had converted, which means he wasn't from a dynasty of royalty as the kings previous, because Maccabees came from a lineage of royalty, and also priesthood, which was a certain issue when he built the temple, which we'll talk about in Jerusalem. When he dies in the year 4 BC, the Romans decide that he became too powerful. Remember, you saw part of it in the film in Caesarea, and they decided to divide his kingdom in 3. Tetrarchs, where comes from the word 3, and his 3 sons were actually princes, more like, though they were called kings, they were actually princes. His son Archelaus, who actually by Herod's own orders was supposed to succeed him, had the Romans not divided his kingdom in 3, rules from Jerusalem. His brother Herod Antipas becomes the governor, prince, or king of the Galilee, and the 3rd brother gets the small section of the Golan Heights, and his name was Philip, Herod Philip. So Herod Archelaus, Herod Antipas, Herod Philip. And Herod Philip builds 2 capitals. They're doing a lot of constructions here. Don't worry. Only when you hear the shrapnel whistling into your ear is when you duck. Otherwise, don't worry. Herod Philip was his capital over here, a huge city. We had a glimpse of it at Caesarea. We'll have a better idea of it tomorrow at Skytopolis. You had an idea of what these cities were like when you visited Jera in Jordan, the Cardo, the theaters, the amphitheaters, the hippodromes. This is what was here. Well, over the years, it was destroyed, covered, and when it was built with pagan temples that were located later. When you go up there, you'll see dozens of pagan temples. The remains, you'll see the floors, you'll see the retaining walls. Near every one of the pagan temples, there's a plaque describing the type of worship that was carried out there. And you'll see that the main worship was sacrificing goats. Goats and sheep, mainly goats, not so much sheep, goats. The main temple was in the cave, in front of the cave, which you'll soon see if you didn't see it before, the huge cave on the left-hand side, believed by the pagans to be the gates of Hades, the gates of hell. And the practice was that you brought your offering, a goat, and you slaughtered the goat, you threw it into the cave, and if the god accepted your offering, the goat would be consumed. If the goat floated, it means that your offering was rejected. The main god worshipped here was the god Pan, half man, half goat, playing the flute. The term we use, panic, comes because of Pan, who used to threaten all the nymphs. When they were bathing, Pan was always there and they would always run away. This is why we use the term panic, because of the god Pan. Arabs cannot pronounce a P. So over the years, this place was known as Banyas. If you look at your map, it's Banyas, B-A-N-I-A-S, but it should be P. Panias, the city of Pan. And to the city, Jesus arrives 2,000 years ago, leaving all the cities where he carried out his ministry, only with his disciples. And I'll remind you the event, and I'm reading from Matthew chapter 16, starting with verse 13. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." "But what do you," he asked, "what do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Bless you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you, Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. Remember, all the events we'll see today, he always reminds his disciples to keep it quiet. He doesn't want to be arrested because he already knows the fate of John the Baptist, who had been beheaded by Herod Antipas. And we'll see it also in Capernaum, and we'll see it when he feeds the 5,000. He always makes sure to keep the authorities unaware that he's around preaching, creating miracles. So this is the place where it happened. The river, what you'll see here, the water flowing here is maybe a tenth of the spring. Most of it is harvested into the irrigation system, so there's a bit of water flowing. Some of it is still the melted snow. Immediately after the melting of the snow in March, there's much more water. You'll also see a big, big pipe when you walk out. This is where they draw the water from the spring. And this spring here, and the dam, and the Patsbani, 3 rivers unite into the Jordan River that flows into the Sea of Galilee. To walk up, you have 2 routes. One on the right-hand side. I will walk and show you the 2 routes. When you get to the top, you'll realize why Christ mentions the gates of Hades, because the people here believe that the cave is the gates to hell. And in those days, also described by Josephus the historian, the water used to go out of the cave. Because of earthquakes, the ceiling of the cave caved in and put a flood on the water. Now the water appears underneath the cave. But 2,000 years ago, when Christ was here, when Josephus describes it, you can picture this cave with huge amounts of water flowing out. And they believe that it's coming from hell, because of the gates of hell. So I'll show you where to go.
We are here in
害
Oahu.
怕我，遍地都是无花
We
果。
have this.
无花果是害怕耶稣。Figs. Hey Peter, these are figs.
One eternity later.
哎呀，怎么进不去了？
The right-hand side was reconstructed, but if you look at the bottom of this arch, I'm pointing at on the other side, on both sides of the bottom you can see the original clay pipes that were used to dry the hot air that came from the furnace under the floor and to the wall. The only difference between this bathhouse and other bathhouses that usually, like the one if you went to Sitopolis, there were two rooms, a dry heat room and a steam room operating simultaneously. Here, you had to decide to use it either as a dry room or, and if you wanted to make it into a steam room, over here there was a large stone basin with water. You pour the water on the floor, you get the steam. And this is why it's the only building at Masada that has an arched ceiling, so that when the steam condenses and the water drops start dropping, they don't drop at the people sitting here, but they slide back on the wall into the pipe system, and you get the constant.
You could use one right now.
I'm telling you, it must have been some short people or a lot of headaches.
Below the fortress
We are at the
of
top
Masada.
where the Romans built the tower, or the roadway coming up.
Lots of people coming here to experience.
Wow!
The top of Masada.
Wow!
Talk about the system that the Romans built, not knowing what they would find when they came in. They wanted to make sure that people don't escape to another fortress and then they'll have to start all over again. Basically, these are the cheap kind of people.
I'm glad we got the piano. I'm sure you've heard it before, but we are
A few moments later.
He was wrote about almost 2,000 years ago. His account contains all the elements of a fantastic drama in which Jews, Romans, and idealists fight to the death. It's no wonder that Hollywood jumped at the opportunity to tell this fascinating story. With an impressive set and thousands of extras, they created a colossal film featuring the rebel leader Eleazar, son of Yair, and the Roman commander Flavius Silva in the leading roles. However, in the movie, unlike real life, no one really deals with the dilemmas or personal struggles, and certainly not with the more problematic aspects of the story. Then where should we start our story? We could start with the Hasmoneans, who were the first to discover the advantages of this isolated cliff in the heart of the desert. Or we could start at the end, with the dramatic project of the Masad excavations, with Igor Eliadim, the head of the excavation team, who would stand on the mountain and read Josephus Flavius' description of the account, and everyone around him could actually hear the echoes of the fighting. Or we could start the quest with King Herod. Herod, who ruled under the auspices of the Romans, built himself a magnificent fortress here on the mountain, which was to be his sanctuary in troubled times. And believe me, he really had troubles. Herod, like any other king, built his palaces to the highest standards of his day. One of them is this Western Palace. Herod's architect was probably a short guy. Here he built himself a bathhouse, and he would put his lamp here and enter his bath. What can I tell you? This king loved the good life. Until now, we spoke about Herod. It wasn't the splendor of Herod's style that made Masada what it is today. The year 66 AD, the Jews rebel against the Roman Empire. 4 years later, the temple is destroyed. Jerusalem falls. Everywhere else, the rebels were suppressed. Masada is the last stronghold where there are still Jewish rebels. And believe me, they didn't need Herod's palaces. The rooms in the wall were divided and used as living quarters. They lived from food in the storerooms, and they drank water from the cisterns, kindly left behind by Herod long ago.
Right from the beginning of the excavations, signs of the rebels were found elsewhere, in the palaces, in the ritual baths, and in particular in the wall. The deepest experience I went through in Masada was when they found in this particular room the first piece of scroll. To see Hebrew letters coming out of the ground, the same letters which are used until today. Later, more fragments of scrolls were found. One I found with my own hands, but the first experience is unforgettable.
Throughout the revolt, groups of refugees sought asylum on the mountain. About 1,000 rebels gathered in this fortress in the heart of the wilderness. In 73 AD, the Romans' 10th Legion arrived with thousands of armed soldiers who deployed themselves around the mountain. An enormous war machine. And the movies do it best, after the Romans, of course. The Romans built an attack ramp. The besieged rebels rolled stones down it. The Romans lifted a tower to the top of the ramp, equipped with a battering ram to smash the wall. The besieged erect a wood and earthen wall to sustain the blows of the battering ram. The Romans burn it, but the wind almost burns their own tower. Then the wind veering as if by divine providence to the south, blowing with full force in the opposite direction, flung flames against the wall, which now was all ablaze. And in the evening, when the wall was burned and breached, the Roman army returned to its camps, assured that the whole affair would be over by morning. But Eleazar had ideas of his own. This is it, the last night. My friends, we've reached the climax of the drama. However, unlike the movie, here apparently the events actually took place. And here at Masada, men with families were forced to decide slavery or death. Eleazar had no doubts, but he had yet to convince his comrades in arms. Ladies and gentlemen, the speech of Eleazar. Oh, my loyal followers, the time has now come that obliges us to make that resolution true in practice. Let our wives die before they are abused, and our children before they have tasted slavery, and preserve ourselves in freedom as an excellent funeral monument for us, as we have preferred death before slavery. Once Igor Eliadim was asked what was the most important artifact he found on Masada. Dozens of priceless objects were found here, he answered, but if I must point to one find, it would be these ostraka. These potsherds. These may be the lots that I'm holding now. Potsherds on which the rebels wrote their names. 10 men who were chosen were the only ones who remained. Their equipment had already burned, and each of them had already killed his wife and children. Then they drew the lots. Who would kill the 9th man and fall on his own sword? And in the morning the Romans arrived, and besides 2 women and a few children, everyone was dead. After the drama came silence. The silence was broken in the 5th century for nearly 200 years by a community of Byzantine monks. 1,200 years later, the first explorers came and rediscovered the mountain. Then the members of the youth movements, seeking a symbol of Jewish heroism, discovered Masada and adopted the mountain. After them came the hikers and the tourists. Masada had become a focus of pilgrimage. Professor Netzer, what do you really think about the act of courage that ended in suicide?
Maybe it's the utmost courage to prefer death to a life of slavery.
So it's death or freedom?
Yes, death as a free man or slavery in the hands of the Romans. Which choice would you make?
No matter what, Masada has become a symbol of staunch resistance against a fierce enemy. And if it is a symbol, then perhaps this might be some kind of victory. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to climb the mountain.
At the balcony of Herod's Hotel in Jerusalem. In Red Sea, I mean. April 26, 2017.
2,400 fragments, each belonging to different scrolls. They think maybe 100, 200 scrolls are different theories, but probably what happened was that the Roman soldier went in and tore up whatever he couldn't take with him. And the question is, what were Roman soldiers doing here? Roman armies sent from Rome to suppress the Jewish revolt that begins in the year 66 AD. The first one bringing in the armies, Vespasian, he's called to Rome, becomes an emperor. This connects to the history of Josephus, I'll tell you later on. And his son Titus reaches Jerusalem.
A new morning is rising in our community, Liacha. We came here to the edge of the country, facing the Dead Sea from Jerusalem, the Galilee, and the plains. We abandoned families, friends, and work to come to the place where we can purify ourselves and properly prepare for the final war. Every Jew who came along did so to get close to the right way and to stay away from the sons of darkness, evil people. Among them, you will even find high priests from Jerusalem. He who believes in our way is the Son of Light, and when the final war begins, all our opponents will be destroyed. But in the meantime, we are here. Here in this holy place, no one can distract our minds from worshiping the Lord. We don't possess much, and the little we have we share equally. But good Lord, He supplies us with all our needs, even in this barren desert. This morning, while working in the date grove, a neighbor from Enot Kanen, 5-hour walk from here, passed by. He told us of the bitter end of one John the Baptist, whose head was severed by King Herod. Suddenly, I remembered we too had one by the name of John. Years ago, he came to us and requested to volunteer. Each new candidate undergoes a thorough examination and, once accepted for a season of study, joins us in work as well. At the end of 2 years' time, just before becoming a full member, he arose, broke his vow to Yahweh, and left. Twice daily, we bathe together in the purifying bath in order to be sanctified in the pure waters. After bathing, we gather together to dine. First, we taste from the pure bread that was prepared for us by the high priests, and then from the wine. When we went for our evening's toil, we inscribed the high priest's words describing the Lord who created the spirits of light and darkness, and thereupon based every being. The first was greatly loved by God, each of its actions desired. The second, and all that it encompassed, he despised forever. At the end of a day's work, we bathed again, and after purifying ourselves, gathered together for the evening meal. We dined in reverent silence, even when troublesome thoughts prey upon us. After the meal, I arose and asked for permission to speak. Could it be that the man who was murdered, of whom we heard from the passerby, was the same John that was with us and then left? It is not the same man, replied the high priest. And in truth, we would be better employed in the studies of the Holy Scriptures rather than wasting our time in the idle talk that spoils the spirit of Yahweh. The wrath that ensued was so great that a remark was noted in the book in my disfavor. After having been punished, things calmed, and we resumed our studies as we do every night until a third of the night is past. But of these things I am not permitted to tell you. We may not reveal our secrets to anyone. Only we, the sons of light, are allowed to share the secrets of Yahweh. This alone may be revealed. All is predestined. There is no free will. Even before the time of creation, it was inscribed that you, somewhere in the future, would hear and see these words. It is God's wondrous plan that brought you today to this pure and sacred place. And God willing, perhaps the secrets may be revealed unto you. In the year 68 CE, just before the Roman army arrived in this part of the country, members of the Yahad hid their writings and put them for safekeeping in the caves surrounding us. Only 1900 years later was the treasure accidentally found inside vessels like those you see before you.
We spoke about was the accidental discovery. This you saw at the end when Muhammad was walking his soul inside. These are the times The historian Josephus describes 4 philosophies that existed in his time, which is 2,000 years ago, time of Christ. There were the Sadducees, who were the aristocracy, the Pharisees, who were like the rabbinical authorities. Then there were the Essenes, the ones who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, but not all the Essenes. Remember, it said in the film that the group left Jerusalem, left the neighborhood of the Essenes, and came here to write these scrolls. And a group that we will discuss tomorrow, and these are the Sicaries. The leader of Masada that we'll visit tomorrow was a Sicari. So 4 philosophies or 4 sects. This was the 3rd, very religious. They had their own ideas about religion, about the temple. I'll tell you more about them. Everything you see are replicas. None of it is original. It's all copies. The real ones are in the Israel Museum. You'll have here a sample of a scroll on the right-hand side. The scrolls were written on parchment, on leather, by professional scribes. If you look at the letters, it's almost like print. These were professional scribes. They used sharpened reeds. The ink was made out of ink that came out of squid together with oil, and the leather was calf's leather. When the site was excavated in the mid-50s by a Franciscan priest, Father Roland de Beaune,